Hello! Welcome to an adventure. In case you are new here, I am Anthony Wright Day Hernandez, Community Collections Archivist here at Virginia Tech, and this is a show called Archival Adventures. This show goes out live on two Twitch channels, the twitch.tv/VTUL Studios channel, which is the University Libraries channel, as well as my own personal channel, twitch.tv/Rogan27. So if I appear to be responding to chat, and you don't see it in the chat that you're in, it's probably in the other one. But I hope everybody is having a good day. I do see Hannah, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining. I haven't heard much of the playlist. It's just the curated classical playlist from Pretzel Rocks. But so far, the little bit I have heard has sounded pretty good. Public Glum, it's amazing to have you joining us today. Fluid Ann, welcome back. Thank you so much for the Prime resubscription. 17 months. Amazing. Welcome. It's great to have you here. I always have all these plans of how I'm going to start, and I didn't quite get there today. I was going to start by having the actual document that was used in the graphic ready to actually see. Yeah, no, I didn't get there. I had too much setting up to do. The music is a tad loud now. Okay, I will adjust that. I still have extremely little control. Nope, that's too far. Okay, it should be quieter now. Hopefully it's a better balance. Sadly, I am not able to hear that balance myself in advance. So I try. But, let me know if the music drops out entirely and you can no longer hear it anymore, or if it gets too loud again, do tell. Anyway, this is the first Archival Adventures of the fall 2023 semester. Classes started on Monday, and so far, it hasn't seemed quite as busy on campus as I remember from years past. I'm not complaining. Despite me saying it hasn't seemed quite as busy, it took me 30 minutes to find a parking space yesterday at around 10:30 in the morning. I started looking for a spot at 10:30, finally parked at 11. Anyway, today on Archival Adventures, we are going to head back to the 1940s in the United States. Specifically going back to the World War II period, but on the home front. Just gonna take a look at a variety of materials that are about what was happening here while people were fighting all across the rest of the world. So that is the plan. Also, I was gonna say it and then I forgot, so I'm gonna say it anyway. I hope that everybody is staying cool in the Northern Hemisphere, especially people, if you're joining from the Midwest or the center of the continent, because there's a gigantic heat bubble. I hope anybody joining from the West Coast did okay with all of the rain and wind, and if you're in Southern California, the earthquakes. And for anybody joining from the Southern Hemisphere, I hope that your winter is going well. I honestly have no idea what the weather is like down there this year, because all we've been hearing about is the difficult weather that's been happening in North America. Yeah, Hannah. Is your heat index up around 130 again today? Because that was a bit much. As we talk about weather and the area, the land and environmental stuffs, here at Virginia Tech, we live and work on the Tutelo and Monacan people's homeland and recognize their continued relationships with their lands and waterways. We further acknowledge that the Morrill Land Grant College Act of 1862 enabled the Commonwealth of Virginia to finance and found Virginia Tech through the forced removal of Native nations from their lands in Western territories. We understand that honoring Native peoples without explicit material commitments falls short of our institutional responsibilities. Through sustained, transparent, and meaningful engagement with the Tutelo and Monacan peoples and other Native nations, we commit to changing the trajectory of Virginia Tech's history by increasing Indigenous student, staff, and faculty recruitment and retention, diversifying course offerings, and meeting the growing needs of all Virginia tribes and supporting their sovereignty. Virginia Tech acknowledges that its Blacksburg campus sits partly on land that was previously the site of the Smithfield and Solitude plantations, owned by members of the Preston family. Between the 1770s and the 1860s, the Prestons and other local white families that owned parcels of what became Virginia Tech also owned hundreds of enslaved people. We acknowledge that enslaved Black people generated wealth that financed the predecessor institution to Virginia Tech, the Preston and Olin Institute, and they also worked on construction of its building. Not until 1953, however, was the first Black student permitted to enroll. Through inclusive VT, the institutional and individual commitment to prosim, that I may serve, in the spirit of community, diversity, and excellence, we commit to advancing a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. So, and then I want to make sure that I am not just randomly sharing random things. I want to make sure that you all see what I'm intending for you to see. So there is a list available if you, there should be in chat very shortly a link to this list. This is a list of the items that I have available today. And so if you click on most of these, hang on. I'm just going to pop this in here. Most of these will take you to the finding aid for the collection, because I have a variety of smaller collections available today. The first one there is a catalog link. It's going to take you to our library catalog entry for the Techgram, which comes from the Rare Books collection. Everything else there is going to be a finding aid that will tell you more about the materials in that collection. And so if you click on one of those and you see something that particularly sounds interesting to you, let me know in chat so that I can make sure that we get to that. I definitely have more here than we will ever get to in 2 hours. Or if one of these, for some reason, catches your eye, let me know so I can make sure that I share it. But otherwise, I have a couple of highlights identified to sort of gravitate towards. But for the most part, aside from glancing at them to say, oh, yep, this looks interesting, I don't know what's actually in them. Because this is an archival adventure, and we're going to explore together to see what there is, see what these primary sources can tell us about history, and just see what we can learn together. I will also mention for anybody who was not aware and maybe didn't come here because of it, this show was in the VT News yesterday. I suppose I could find that article. Maybe. Aha, here we go. I'll just drop this link. Hi, and that's how you heard about it. Yeah, I kind of thought there might be a person or two that would show up. So yeah, welcome. Thanks for joining. And if you, anytime you have a comment or want to share something, feel free to just type in chat. Because it's definitely, it's a better experience for me and generally a better experience for people watching if people are commenting in chat. And if you weren't here at the very top of stream, this goes out on 2 channels. So I've got 2 different chats, like side by side. So I might end up responding to a chat that that you don't see in front of you. There is a way to do multi-twitch and like see both of them at once. Someday I might make a command that, hi Puddle Glove, thanks. Here's a chat comment for Twitch engagement purposes. Well, how about we actually get started looking at some documents, which requires me to actually, activate the top-down camera. And I'm going to start with the very first thing that I had on the list, which is the Techgram. And I don't know how to describe the Techgram. So there's the Collegiate Times, which is the university's newspaper. The Techgram, I'm not certain how it really differs. I'm gonna see if I can find out, because I know I've used it as a source, but I don't really know the difference in intent. Because it reads like a newspaper. But I'm unclear as to why there were 2. That is something that I have never had explained. And I don't see a quick and easy answer. If anybody does know that aspect of Virginia Tech history, feel free to share, because that is something I'm really curious about. I've been here 8 years, and I've been in special collections and university archives that whole time, and I don't know the answer as to. So there was the Daily Bulletin, which was like a newsletter that went out to faculty and staff. There was the Techgram, which you can see in the byline here at the top, published semi-monthly by the Virginia Polytechnic Institute, Blacksburg, Virginia, entered as second-class matter, January 15th, 1923, at the post office at Blacksburg, Virginia, under the Act of August 24th, 1912. So it's like a small newspaper. Ah! Maybe that's it. Sorry. I hope that wasn't too loud. This is, the audience for this is alumni and informed Virginia Tech alumni. So the Collegiate Times is the school newspaper. It's run by students. So student editor, students writing the articles, but it's the school newspaper. And I knew, like, the Techgram, it's like a newsletter more than a newspaper, but the articles are similar to newspaper articles. And I honestly had not, I probably have seen that before and had made this realization before, but completely forgot. I just know it's a source. Anyway, thankfully, I have solved that. Intended for alumni. So, World War II. I don't want to presume that anybody is fully versed in world history. What do you know about World War II? I like to start with the dates. So, general primer info for anybody that might be here and might not know details. And I'm just pulling this from Wikipedia because this is, again, general primer information, which Wikipedia is not a bad source for I just want the basics. Wikipedia is okay, generally. There are more authoritative encyclopedias that you could go to, but what is this thing? Generally not a bad source. For research purposes, you will want something else. Anyway, the Second World War was a global conflict that lasted from 1939 to 1945. The vast majority of the world's countries, including all of the great powers, which is defined here as a great power is a sovereign state that is recognized as having the ability and expertise to exert its influence on a global scale. Great powers characteristically possess military and economic strength, as well as diplomatic and soft power influence, which may cause middle or small powers to consider the great power. I would have to click further. Anyway, that should give a general idea of what they mean by great power. Anyway, causes are debated. There were generally two two areas, regions, that are referred to as theaters during the war. So there was the European theater and the Pacific theater, as to the general way that the war gets talked about. The European theater, that was fighting against primarily German and Italian armies that were spreading out across Europe and conquering land. Although the Axis powers, the German and Italian alliance there, also pushed into Northern Africa, but it gets grouped in with the European theater. Pacific theater was Japan, and Japan was also one of the Axis powers allied with Germany and Italy, and Japan was fighting against countries in the Pacific, and actually the bombing of Pearl Harbor brought the United States into the war. That was in December of 1941. And so that's sort of a general overview. There's a lot of information that growing up in the US I encountered about the European theater of operations. A little information that I encountered about the Pacific theater of operations, but generally did not learn a lot about conflict happening with Korea, China, like Vietnam, India, like their involvement really wasn't covered very much. It was more Japan and the Pacific Island nations and things like that. Australia was definitely involved. I'm sure New Zealand was as well, but New Zealand gets left off of global maps. So But generally, we don't hear a whole lot about their involvement, at least here in the US. So if anybody wants to share any particulars that they know about those things, do let me know. Anyway. The other thing that doesn't really get talked about very much with regard to World War II, at least in my experience, and do tell if you have different experience. Sorry, my cord catching. I don't know much about involvement of South American countries in World War II. Just not something that I ever really have heard much about. We're not likely to find out much about that today, but it's possible. But the items that I pulled today are specifically about World War II on the home front. So there was the Pacific Theater and the European Theater, and then there was the home front. And the home front specifically refers to activities and operations that were happening in the home countries, the countries where the fighting was not actually going on. So the US, the home front was here in North America. For Britain, the home front was referring to the British Isles. And yes, there was definitely bombing and like the Blitz happening in London and stuff like that, but home front operations were things like gardening programs and scrap drives and all of the things that the people back in the home country were doing to support the war effort. And so those are the things that we're going to be looking at today. Hi, Key Squared. Yes, we are on an adventure. So my target in looking at this, I pulled the Techgram, the alumni newsletter. This is volume 17 through 20, which covers October 1939 through September 1943. I did not pull the subsequent volumes going from October 1943 until the end of the war, because I pulled this specifically for some certain items that I was aware of that are in it. But this area includes the start of World War II and the initial involvement of the United States. So, the beginning of World War II was listed as 1st September 1939. So the first issue that's in here is actually from October of 1939. We'll just see if there's any mention even, because I will be actually surprised if there is. I know definitely as we move forward in time, there will be mentions, but I'll be, oh no, I wanted to go the other way with the camera. So far, nothing's jumping out at me, none of the headlines. And honestly, this isn't surprising. The US was not involved in the war in 1939, and this is a newsletter, so it's specifically about Virginia Tech, not like a general newspaper about what's going on in the world. I'm sure if I went and pulled the Collegiate Times, or I can't remember the date of the change, it was probably called the Virginia Tech back then, but the student newspaper, if I pulled the student newspaper, it would probably have something about the start of the war. What I specifically was looking for in here, so December of 1941 was the bombing of Pearl Harbor. which officially brought the US into the war. So that's my target date, is the beginning of December 1941. If anybody has any specific dates that you would want me to look for or get near, feel free to share. But otherwise, I'm just gonna go for ones that seem to make sense. And you can see I already had a flag in this one. I can go back, but so it's twice monthly. The first one came out December 1st, 1941, which was before the bombing. So this issue is from before the US joined the war, officially. And these are all just sort of general things that looks like continued from page 1. There is a heading of war here. So let's find the article here. I'll zoom in. All right, the Techgram, volume 19, it looks like. No. Yeah, XIX, 19. Number 5, December 1st, 1941, war, if necessary, favored by 91% of students, poll shows. By W.H. Crockford, class of 32. If United States civil and military leaders should conclude that it is absolutely necessary for us to go to war with the Axis powers to keep the country safe and free, approximately 91% of the students on the VPI campus would favor such a war, according to a poll conducted here by the Virginia Tech Student Weekly newspaper, results of which were released in the November 13 issue of the paper. The editors were careful to point out, however, that the poll was not held with the object of obtaining figures which could be distorted into scare headlines, such as "Tech students overwhelmingly favor war," and in an editorial, they directed attention to the fact that the questions were worded in such a manner as to preclude the possibility of any such conclusions being drawn from the results. The vote indicated, quote, that VPI students do not want a war, but that they will not shirk their duty if such a war comes, the editorial explained. This was indicated by the results and also by the numerous cases in which the student was not satisfied to write yes or no, but wrote in his views. Date-wise, VPI would have already had female students, so, but phraseology and VPI had female students for about 20 years at this point, and yet wrote in his views. A goodly number of students stated that they thought that the people should have a vote in the declaration of such a war. These students felt that the people who would have to fight were the ones who should decide whether or not such a war was necessary. If the waging of the war should require sending an army to fight on foreign soil, the students would still definitely, though less overwhelmingly, approve the decision of the nation's leaders, according to the poll. The vote on this question was 67.1% in approval, 29.9% against, and approximately 3% undecided. Only 8.5%, however, thought that the country should continue its traditional way of life with a triumphant Germany in the world. Almost 90% were sure it could not, and just 1.8% were undecided. A total of 2,114 of the approximately 3,000 students at Blacksburg voted on the 3 questions put to them by the newspaper. Those casting ballots included 1,959 of the 2,326 members of the Tech Corps of Cadets, The 285 students at the college's 3 extension schools at Bluefield, Norfolk, and Richmond were not polled. And so it continues, and you can see there a chart at the bottom detailing question 1, if our civil and military leaders should reach the conclusion that it is absolutely necessary for us to go to war with the Axis powers to keep the country safe and free, would you favor such a war? So the Corps of Cadets, only 137 of those polled said no. Civilian students, meaning civilian male students, 28 out of 100 said no. 82 said yes. My math is right there, isn't it? No, that's 110. 28 out of 110. Co-ed, meaning in this case, because this was 1941, meaning female students. It looks like, 45 were polled and 8 of them said no. So, decent support for if it was determined that war was necessary, backing that. And you can see that the other 2 questions had similar, although, well, yeah. So question 3, do you believe that our country could go on peacefully and happily, living its traditional and good way of life with a triumphant Germany in the world? And yeah, most people were like, not possible. So this is the week before Pearl Harbor was bombed. The vast majority of the students at Virginia Tech at the time, Fluidan, were in the military Corps of Cadets, yes. Including the female students. Like, I can't remember off the top of my head whoops, I don't want the admin version, hang on. I'm gonna pull up the timeline for my reference so I don't give bad information, but I'm trying to remember when it was officially allowed for students to enroll without being in the Corps of Cadets. Real quick. Okay, that was weird. No, did we just go offline? Hello? Are we streaming? So weird. Yeah, it looked like it blinked. Everkirk, thank you. Also, welcome. Yeah, the internet just completely dropped for a second. I just noticed that like something, there was a weird refresh that I saw on the monitor, and then I noticed that the viewer counts were both at 0, and went to check, and it was like, oh, you've only been live for 28 seconds. And I'm like, huh. I'm glad it was just a hiccup and not like multiple minutes. I'm trying to look and see when, all right, a civilian student union was formed in 1930. Women were first admitted in 1921. engineering station. International student, VPI fight song, 8th president, ROTC. Women first got to sit in classes for no credit in 1916. Ag extension, first international student of Middle Eastern descent. It's got to be on this list somewhere. Actually, there's no guarantee that it is. I'm not certain. Although, generally, Corps of Cadets... here we go. 1924. In 1924, participation in the Corps of Cadets became optional, but only for juniors and seniors. Freshmen and sophomores, first and second year students, were required to be in the Corps of Cadets still. But after their first 2 years, they could choose to leave the Corps of Cadets and become a civilian student. And so that started in 1924. Otherwise, before 1924, all of the students were in the Corps of Cadets. Whether they were domestic students, international students, that would have been the first 3 years of women students. Up until 1924, 100% of the students were required to be in the Corps of Cadets. So that's a good question, though. And I didn't know the answer off the top of my head, which is why it took me a second. But yeah. All right, so this was the week before Pearl Harbor. Oh. Yeah. That's gonna be a no. Sorry, there's a bot that needs to be squished. Just gonna done. Bad bot. Right. Let's advance because I have gotten bogged down, and I do want to make it past the Techgram. Anyway, December 15th, 1941, the second issue in December of the Techgram, 1941. You can see it starts out, and it just looks like a normal issue. The focus is on university stuff that alumni might want to know. You move to the second and third pages. The War and VPI. And so that's where I'm going to start. Ooh, grilled cheese, yum. All right. The horror and treachery of Sunday afternoon, December 7, hardly yet seems more than a terrible nightmare. Our thoughts immediately turn to Techmen, relatives, and friends of persons here, and Army officers formerly stationed at Tech, who are now on duty in Hawaii and in the Philippines. Our heartfelt wish goes out for their safety. Many Techmen are serving their country in the posts now under the dastardly attacks. Undoubtedly, they are giving a good account of themselves in these trying times. Already an unusually high percentage of tech men are serving their country. That they will serve their country well goes without saying. That has been true of every war that this country has been in since the founding of Virginia Tech. The entire Cadet Corps volunteered its services in the Spanish-American War, and a brilliant record was made by Techmen in World War I. In the present unwanted struggle, brought on by international gangsters, Techmen will take their parts fearlessly and unflinchingly well. So that's the first, real time that this publication addresses the war directly, and it is the first issue after the U.S. officially joined the war. There are, however, as we move forward, additional things of interest. I'm sure there's plenty of them in here that I have not specifically identified because, honestly, I have not gone through page by page to look. The reason I pulled this volume was 1943. The January 1st issue of 1943 I know that advancing through the period of the war, the Bugle, there are, I believe, 2 years that there was no issue of the Bugle even published. The Bugle was the yearbook. And so for 2 years during World War II, and I can't remember for sure, I think it's 44 and 45, there was no issue of the Bugle. It wasn't even published. So this is still before that. But as you can see on the cover here, Victorious New Year. If we just flip back to a few of the other covers just as a quick glance, 41, oh, that's too far back. Huh, sorry. June of 42, nothing. I know there's, by November of 42, we've got war bonds ads on the title. So, front cover, above the fold, most tech students assured of completing winter term, which tells me there was concern about whether they would get to finish their winter term in 1943 by Robert McNeil, and who was the editor of the Techgram. The next part that Virginia Tech will take in the war became somewhat clearer late in December with the following developments. 1. The announcement, December 17, by Paul V. McNutt, who only a few days before had been named Manpower Commissioner by President Roosevelt, of the Joint Army-Navy plan for using the facilities of between 300 and 350 colleges for the training of approximately 250,000 qualified young men. 2. Assurance given by the War Department that students in the enlisted Reserve Corps would not be called to active duty until at least 2 weeks after the completion of the student's first academic quarter, term, or semester terminating after December 31st, 1942. In the case of Virginia Tech, this means that students will be able to complete at least the winter quarter, which ends March 19th. Immediately after the announcement of the General National Policy for the joint use of the colleges, Virginia Tech officials received questionnaires asking definite information about the facilities at Virginia Tech. These questionnaires were returned to Washington shortly before Christmas. Commissioner McNutt appointed an educational committee composed of 7 college presidents and 2 laymen who are experienced in governmental and educational work to select the institutions to be used. This committee began its deliberations December 29th, and its decisions probably will be announced before this Techgram is mailed. While other developments and instructions from Washington were awaited, Virginia Tech officials completed plans for the registration for the winter quarter scheduled for Monday, January 4, 1943. Classes for that quarter will begin at 8 o'clock Tuesday morning, January 5th. Because of the accelerated program, seniors will be enabled to obtain their college degrees before being called to active duty. Their degrees will be conferred at the winter quarter convocation, now scheduled for March 20th. All students were advised during the holidays to return to college until they were actually called into military service. Dr. Francis J. Brown, consultant for the American Council on Education, was quoted in the December 29 afternoon report of the Associated Press as follows. In issuing his advice to students, Dr. Brown, who sat in on the military educational parlays prior to the Joint Army-Navy Special Training announcement, said countless college youths were up in the air over whether they should return to school after the holidays. Members of the enlisted reserve who will be affected by the new military training program will not be called for some time yet, he said, adding that many civilian students who remain in school will get temporary draft deferments, and some eventually may have their tuition paid by the government. The ACE consultant said that under the Army-Navy program, the enlisted reserves whose academic term ends in 1942 are entitled to another term before being called, and that those whose current term ends in 1943 are free to go back to school and finish it. Quote, no student who is a member of the enlisted reserve will be called to active duty under this program until at least 2 weeks after completion of his first academic term or semester, which ends in 1943, unquote, Dr. Brown said. And most of them may not be called for a long time after that. It takes a great deal of time to set up such a system as this, and it would not be surprising if many of the enlisted reserves were not called for several months. As for the strictly civilian students, he pointed out that McNutt recently estimated more than 150,000 medical, dental, veterinary, engineering, and other special science students would be kept in school through a new temporary draft deferment order. In addition, the manpower chief said plans are being made for the government to finance the college schooling of a number of civilians as well as servicemen. It is obvious, he continued, that the military leaders are anxious to get as many educated men as they can, and the sensible thing for the average youth to do is to stay in school as long as possible. And not just the aeronautical students who are meant to be up in the air. Key squared. You're not wrong. So that was an interesting one to me. Like, this was, I don't know a whole lot about the World War II draft in the U.S. But we get to learn a little bit about it, starting right now. So September 16, 1940, the U.S. instituted the Selective Training and Service Act of 1940, which required the registration. It's the first peacetime draft in U.S. history. Wow. So yeah, I don't know what was specifically, I guess it was because of this training program, the Army-Navy plan that was headed by Paul McNutt, which I am not particularly familiar with. Let's find out. I think we found it. The War Manpower Commission. The commission was created by President Franklin D. Roosevelt on April 18th, 1942. Chairman was McNutt, head of the FSA, Federal Security Agency. It was headed by him as the chairman and consisted of representatives of the Department of War, Department of the Navy, Department of Agriculture, Department of Labor, and War Production Board. The Labor Production Division of the War Production Board, the Selective Service System, and the U.S. Civil Service Commission. Executive Order 9279, dated December 5th, 1942, transferred the Selective Service System to the War Manpower Commission. A year later, it was made a separate agency. Ah, okay. So, this being January of 43, it had just, like, the draft itself had just come under the War Manpower Commission, and people were uncertain of what that meant for them. So that's why that story, which is still not the one I pulled this for. And neither is this one, but we're going to look at this one too. The one I actually pulled this for is on this page, but we'll get there. Yay, grilled cheese! Welcome back, Puddle Glum. I don't know if you know, but during study week, just before exams here on campus at Virginia Tech, the library makes and hands out hundreds of grilled cheese sandwiches for free to the students who are studying for exams. And they've done that since before I started working here, so more than 8 years. I don't know exactly when it started. January 15th, 1943, college closing rumors branded as absurd by President Burris. Despite reports to the contrary, Virginia Tech will continue to offer college instruction after March 19th, when most of the seniors and juniors are expected to be called to active duty. There is no idea, purpose, or intention of discontinuing the operation of this institution, Dr. Julian A. Burris, class of '98, president of Virginia Tech, declared in an executive bulletin sent to the faculty January 11th. Seniors, seniors will be ordered to Officers Candidate School shortly after they receive their diplomas at the close of the winter quarter, March 19th, and juniors in the ROTC, who are members of the Enlisted Reserve Corps, will go to replacement training centers, then to receive training in military normally taken as college seniors. Virginia Tech students have been informed. Present plans of the War Department call for discontinuing ROTC training in all colleges and universities. Consequently, Tech students, when they begin their junior year, will not be offered contracts. Sophomores and freshmen can stay in college until they are called to active duty by their selective service boards. In certain occupational classifications, they may be deferred by the local board so as to continue studying at Tech. The seniors are being called to active duty in March because they will have completed their college work at that time. Under the accelerated program, which enabled them to take a full quarter's work during the past summer, they will have completed the same amount of studies in March that would normally have taken them until June to finish. Because no ROTC camps were held last summer, the Tech seniors will be ordered to Officers Candidate Schools for 3 months training before being commissioned as second lieutenants. After the juniors have successfully completed their military training in a replacement center, they will be sent to an Officers Candidate School to qualify as second lieutenants. Students are being urged by officials of the War Manpower Commission, Army, Navy, and College to continue their studies until they are called to active duty. Some pointers about the program being mapped out for the colleges were discussed by officials of the War Department at a meeting of representatives of the 8 essentially military colleges held in Washington January 8th and 9th. Major R. Lee Humbert represented President Burris at the conference. So it was big news because most of the students at the school were in the Corps of Cadets and officially members of the military thereby. But the reason I pulled this volume to look at today was this story that I happened to know about. New Fields for Women by Dr. Mildred T. Tate. January 15th, 1943. It's interesting how different the cultural dynamic is compared to later drafts. Oh yeah, very, very different. If you compare the World War II draft as evidenced here to the Vietnam draft. Like really, really big difference. Or Korean War. Yeah. Did they draft for Korea? I honestly don't know. My brain thinks of the Korean War and all I have in my brain is the TV show MASH. And I cannot recall. I know Vietnam, but if somebody can confirm for me. But yeah, definitely like a difference between the 40s and the 70s with regard to the draft. New Fields for Women. The coming of war and the increasing demand for manpower has awakened America to the fact that one source of manpower needed by the nation for keeping the wheels of industry going to defend the nation and to provide the welfare has been practically untapped. The womanhood of America. Okay, Key Squared. If the protagonists on the show were complaining about being drafted, then I suppose there was a draft. And it would make sense that the Korean conflict would have included the draft based on the timing of it and the use of such and length of it, and yeah. This is a very sexist article, but typical of the time and a little bit humorous because of how it's begun. Not that I'd usually use a TV show as a valid historical source, but given that it was in recent memory at the time, someone would probably notice if they'd... Yeah, I mean, MASH, the show, lots of things were fictionalized, but general broad facts are probably reliable. We'll just confirm. Ooh, hello, article called Conscription in the U.S. In the U.S., military conscription, commonly known as the draft, has been employed by the U.S. federal government in 6 conflicts: the American Revolutionary War, the American Civil War, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. I know, Puddle Glove. Women can do things? I had no idea. We need manpower, and we've completely ignored one untapped resource, the womanhood of America. Interested industrial concerns are begging for young, trained women to fill places formerly held by men. That women are especially adept in these fields has been proven by the work already being done by them. An extensive study conducted by the Women's Bureau of the United States Department of Labor in the spring of 1942 estimated that 2 million women would be needed for work on the production of war materials before the end of 1942. Those needed in 1943 will greatly exceed this number, no doubt. It was the feeling of the Women's Bureau that women should be trained in mathematics, chemistry, industrial physics, engineering, and medicine to take their place in the war efforts. Furthermore, they should be able to find a place in any of these industries or professions leading to a career after the termination of the present emergency. Positions as draftsmen, inspectors, supervisors, engine testing, computations, laboratory technicians, doctors and dentists, and a wide range of precision work are available to women who have the necessary training. Although there are many positions open to women in the above-mentioned fields, only a few women are trained for them. The dearth of trained women to meet the needs of the nation in this vital period is deplorable. Although women's training has been held up to criticism during the last year and found lacking in many respects, the lack cannot be blamed entirely on the women. In the past, many of the colleges and universities and special curricula within colleges which trained for these special fields of work were not open to women. And if they were open, more often than not, women were discouraged from entering. Many of the land-grant colleges have offered this vital training to women. However, some have opened their doors to women within recent years, and others are still closed. But since 1921, the Virginia Polytechnic Institute has had all its curricula opened to women. Many of its women graduates are in vital national work. The graduates of the last 2 years are already found in key positions, including editors, chemists in industry, food inspectors with USDA, laboratory technicians, research workers, government workers, recreational workers, to say nothing of the generally accepted positions for women. I suppose that phrase is supposed to refer to like teaching and secretarial work, which is what most colleges offered as programs for women. Teaching colleges was where women were expected to go. The fact that Tech actually would admit women and that they technically could take any of the programs offered at Tech was unusual, although women were not housed on campus. And it was up to them to be able to get to campus in order to take said academic programs. It's convoluted. The history changes over time. Once they are on campus, then later Radford University becomes part of Virginia Tech, and it's the women's college, and it offers typical women's college curricula, meaning teaching and secretarial work, but all women were housed at Radford, and there was no regular bus service between the two campuses. So women were housed there, making it extra hard for them to actually reach courses that were not in traditional women's college roles. But that's not until the 1960s. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, I love the phrase, cannot be blamed entirely on the women. All right, so let's see how this ends. The Virginia Polytechnic Institute has the facilities for rendering a great service to the state and nation through the offering of scientific and technical training to the womanhood of the state. There should be many more women students at VPI for the good of the state as well as the future of VPI. It is hoped that loyal alumni will call to the attention of qualified women students capable of scientific and technical training the fine opportunities offered to women students at this institution. I know there was another bit. I don't particularly know exactly where. Aw. I mean, that was a good story. It's not the one that I had been thinking of. And I don't know specifically which issue that one is in. So I'm not going to spend forever looking for it. But there's a lovely one about specific fast track aeronautical engineering courses for women being offered at the Virginia Tech airport. I want to say that was in 44, though. And of course, they can't ask male classmates for rides, since being alone in a car with a man would mean they were clearly morally unfit for the academic environment or something. I think you're probably fairly accurate there. Or so went the lecture my mom got at a peer institution at the time. Yeah, that sounds spot on. Yeah, and I didn't pull 44. So I guess we're not going to see the lovely, it was just like a listing of courses, but the Tech aeronautical engineering program actually did special short, condensed, fast track courses to teach women to become airplane mechanics because they needed more airplane mechanics. That, if anybody wants to see that, it's on the timeline. The Virginia Tech 150 years timeline, which I can toss that link in chat. Exhibit /UT 150. Haha, no, gosh, come on. Oh, helps if I type correctly, you know, sometimes. All right, let's look at some other things since I spent tons of time on the Techgram, although multiple articles, and they were interesting. But, yeah, let's look at the Robert Taylor. That one was one that I found particularly interesting. I do want to pop into the Blacksburg-VPI Civilian Defense Council records. Nelson Liddle. That one also looked really cool. And, oh gosh, I just want to look at all of them because they're all amazing. All right, I'm just going to start. I may have a problem, and that problem is I find historical documents neat, and I get wrapped up in looking at them, and I lose track of time. So whatever. I'm going to take a look now at the Roanoke Committee for Clothes Collection flyer, circa 1945. Let's zoom out so we can see it in its entirety. It has been placed inside of a mylar sleeve. It looks like conditionally it was brittle and falling apart, so this is to protect it. And I don't know a whole lot about it. I don't know much about the committee itself. I can check and see if the person who processed this may have found some general history of the organization. Oh, lovely. I forgot. Oh gosh, all those links are broken. Oh, that's frustrating. Yeah, it's a whole thing. Hang on one second. All right, Roanoke Committee for Clothes Collection flyer. See if I've got a historical note. It's brief. During World War II, the Roanoke Committee for Clothes Collection for our Allies set up sites in Roanoke County and the City of Roanoke to collect donations of clothes and shoes. Participants could leave donations at local schools, churches, and the YMCA or YWCA. Yeah, this collection is just a flyer. So let's take a look at the flyer. Share your surplus clothes with the war victims. Sponsor, Roanoke Committee for Clothes Collection for Our Allies. Goal, 350,000 pounds of clothing and shoes from Roanoke City and County. Please observe the following. Gather spare clothing suitable for men, women, or children, any age, any size, any fabric, any weight. Garments must be clean and usable. Shoes should be tied securely together in pairs. All school children are urged to bring to their respective schools on each Wednesday during April the contribution of clothing, shoes, and blankets from their homes and the homes of neighbors who have no children in school. These contributions will be deposited at the school in a spot to be designated by the principal and will be removed to a central collection point where they will be assorted and packed for shipment. Church members take their clothing to their church on weekends during April. The YMCA, YWCA, all firehouses and collection headquarters, 108.5 West Salem Avenue, will receive clothing anytime during April. I guess the address, 108.5 West Salem Avenue, is the address of the collection headquarters. And if anybody is unfamiliar, YMCA is Young Men's Christian Association, and YWCA is Young Women's Christian Association. Schedule of clothes collection for Roanoke City and County. Each Wednesday, school children bring clothing to their respective schools. Each weekend, church is open to receive contributions anytime. YMCA, YWCA, fire stations, and Central Collection Headquarters. Saturday, April 14th, Boy and Girl Scouts will make special collection. When clothing ready for removal to Central Collection Station, dial 7841. For additional information, call local headquarters, dial 8889. Yes, 1940s. For a local call, you just had to dial 4 numbers. Search your heart and your home for clothes, shoes, blankets, I assume. Collection period, April 1st to 30th? What can you spare? That, I don't know exactly how that was going to end, but yeah. This would have been just like a flyer left, probably just passed out, or, I mean, it looks like a mailer, possibly. It's a trifold, or it's got multiple folds. It reminds me of when I was in high school, or maybe going back a little bit further, when I was in middle school and they did food drives, and the Boy Scout troop would go around and like hang a plastic grocery bag on every single house's door, that a week later they were going to come back and pick up any bags that had things put in them, and like the bag itself then in the like 90s, the bag itself had the instructions on it, but that reminds me sort of that kind of drive. Let's see, World War II sugar rationing pamphlets, 1941 to 1945. I will see what kind of info I've got, and then we'll take a look. MS 2015-048. Oh, I typed in the wrong keyboard. I also have multiple computers in front of me, so. Oh, I see what I did wrong. World War II sugar rationing pamphlets. The rationing of food during the Second World War in the United States started on April 27, 1942, when the Office of Price Administration halted all consumer sales of sugar. The rationing of sugar was distributed based on the size of the household of the family buying it. Although the war ended in late 1945, rationing did not end until 1946. That was the historical note on the finding aid for this collection. So, April 27th, 1942, some organization called the Office of Price Administration halted the sale of sugar and regulated it by rationing. And so these are related to that. And hey, look, wartime services for the Homefront. Yay! Finally, something that actually talks about the Homefront. I mean, everything we've looked at has been related to the Homefront, but this is the first thing that actually said the word. And you can see the patriotic red, white, and blue, and the stars, and that was very typical of 1940s sort of patriotic internal propaganda of the United States. The marketing is very strong, yes. And it is propaganda. There are actually some online collections of World War II wartime propaganda. If you go to the Library of Congress website, and there are very different approaches to propaganda, but propaganda was very iconic during World War II. And they have a really good collection there of a lot of World War II propaganda, including things from America, the UK, Germany, Italy, and Japan. And so definitely some things that I had never seen before, and I believe a lot of that collection is available to view online. So that's the Library of Congress, that, or the National Archives, where you should be able to find that. I don't have a link for it just off the top of my head, but a lot of my learning about this as a kid was reading the American Girl books about Molly, World War II era doll, which always had a 5 to 10 page history blurb about whatever time period the books were set in. Oh, that's really cool. That's a wonderful way to educate. Education, mixing learning and play is very useful for education purposes. There's a lot of theoretical approaches, a theoretical explanation or exploration of game theory and education, and how to use games to teach people. So that just, it makes me think of that. They tended to have a lot of pictures and commentary on this kind of stuff. Anyway, so there's a very distinct style. Save on sugar. If we save 1 teaspoon of sugar per person a day, it will total many thousands of tons a month, mean releasing ships and vast supplies for war needs. Signed, Betty Crocker, which I don't think, yeah. Signed Betty Crocker, who is a fictional character. That's like having it be signed by Uncle Sam. Betty Crocker, there is no such person, and was no such person. There was a person who portrayed Betty Crocker for a while. But yeah. Sugar saving tips. Be sure that sugar used in beverages is dissolved, not left in the bottom of cup or glass. Undissolved sugar sweetens only the sink. Be sure that fresh fruits are ripe, then they won't require as much sugar. Serve sweet desserts that don't call for sugar, such as fruit cups, fruit gelatins, gingerbreads, etc. See page 4 for sugarless desserts. See page 4? Two-page pamphlet published by Betty Crocker, Home Services Department, General Mills Incorporated. The pamphlet tips promotes the use of... I wonder what it was in. Or no, there's it's a 4-page document. I figured it out. Sorry. Serve cereals, sometimes with brown sugar, honey, syrup, or molasses, with dried fruits, dates, raisins, etc., or sweet fresh fruit. Serve fruit, fresh, dried, or canned, and vegetables naturally rich in sugar, carrots, sweet potatoes, parsnips, etc., to satisfy craving for sweets. I have no idea what a parsnip tastes like. It is not something I would have thought of as sweet. But again, I have no idea what it tastes like, so interesting. Carrots are definitely a sweet item, and sweet potatoes as well. Basically white carrots. Okay. Add a pinch of salt to accent the sweet flavor of fruits and cooked foods. Dried fruits to modify the tartness of sour fruits, such as rhubarb. Tapioca to cut the tartness slightly, as in fruit pies. Sugar at the last. When cooking sour fruits, it takes less sugar. So if you're cooking sour fruits, cook them and add the sugar at the very end, because then you don't need as much sugar. Interesting. I see in these some behaviors and habits that my grandparents had. That I never really thought anything about. That was just like things that my grandparents did. And I'm reading this and I'm like, huh, I wonder if this is why they did them. Use the sweet syrup from canned fruits for sweetening fruit beverages, fruit gelatins, sherbets, and fruit puddings. Use corn syrup or honey in place of sugar to sweeten beverages, and here's the start of that. Berries and fruit in shortcakes, etc. Also, in place of sugar and water, syrup in fruit rolls, and to sweeten whipped cream. What I'm interested in seeing is what the rationing looked like for some of the other foods they're talking about. Yeah, that would be interesting, and I might have something that would give us that. Let's see, also in place of sugar. Oh, Bisquick. Use Bisquick in making shortcakes. Bisquick also being like a Betty Crocker product. Fruit rolls and cobblers. It contains some sugar, so you don't need to add any to the dough. Use recipes for sugarless icings, page 3. Also, omit icings on sides of cake. So only ice the top of the cake. Following a few of the sugar-saving ideas above will allow each family to carry on a normal amount of baking, including a cake, a pie, and a batch of cookies each week. Betty Crocker, Home Services Department, General Mills Incorporated, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And then you get, so there's 2 pages of recipes. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on them. There is this information: how to use substitutes for sugar in baked foods when necessary. And I'm curious, I haven't done this research, but it strikes me as interesting. Sugarless options are something that diabetic diets call for, and diabetic diets, we know from an episode that we did, I think last year, possibly the year before, I don't remember for sure. There have been specialized diets for diabetes going back to like the Roman Empire. But the ones that we looked at went back into like the late 1800s and seemed somewhat familiar towards advice that is still given to diabetics today. Not all of it applied, and this is not a place to get medical advice. But recipes and advice for using less sugar because of rationing would also mean items with less sugar that would be more diabetic friendly. And I'd be curious to see how the two compare. Hi, welcome back, Hannah. People came in. I love that your shop always gets business when I go live. If you have ample amounts of sugar, use sugar for best results. This is a pamphlet about rationing. If you must save sugar, here are a number of ideas that will give acceptable results with substitutes. Honey imparts a honey flavor to bakings. Use syrup or honey at room temperature. In quick breads containing only a small amount of sugar, 1/4 cup, use white corn syrup or honey in place of sugar. In recipes with more sugar, substitute for 2/3 of the sugar and reduce liquid as in cakes below. Add syrup or honey with egg and liquid if muffin method is used. If cake method, beat it into shortening and sugar for cakes. In yeast doughs, use white corn syrup or honey in place of sugar, same amount. If dough seems sticky to handle, use a little extra flour. In custard-type desserts, use syrup or honey in place of sugar, same amount. Reduce liquid 1/4 cup for each cup of syrup or honey used. So these are just general, like, substitution instructions. It's interesting to me, like, all of the, use corn syrup, and it's like, oh, but today, like, we know that corn syrup super not great for you, and part of our problem is that it's in everything now. And we now know that replacing corn syrup with sugar would actually be healthier. Recipes to stretch your sugar ration from Arm & Hammer baking soda. Corn syrup cake, first thing in there. Yay, corn syrup. I have used corn syrup in cooking, and there are times when it is useful, but yeah. Gotta love that. And of course, these recipes specifically call for Arm & Hammer brand or Cow brand baking soda. Cow brand being another brand of baking soda owned by the same company. I presume, because it's mentioned here. I've never actually heard of Cow brand baking soda before. There's probably much more in our archives on it, but I don't spend a lot of time with the food archives. Applesauce cake, definitely something that I am aware of, where in this case you've only got a 1/4 cup of sugar because you're including thick applesauce instead, and you're getting the sweetness from the applesauce. It doesn't specify what type of apples to make your sauce from. I assume that they think you're buying your applesauce, but you would probably want a sweeter apple, which at the time, popular apples would have been things like Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, things like that. Granny Smith would probably also have been around and popular. I don't know. I know a little bit about varietals. I know that over time, Red Delicious were specifically bred for attractiveness, which led to a mealy, off-putting texture inside. And so they're not the best for eating, but they look really nice. But that's what they were bred for, was looks. All right, let's see. Extra sweet news for home bakers. Stretched sugar ration with corn syrup as sweetener. Again, get around that sugar rationing by dumping corn syrup in your things. No need to give up sweet foods because of sugar rationing. Try your favorite recipes with corn syrup as a sweetener. Here are proportions. Sugar-saving recipes. Crystal and golden corn syrups have a wide variety of uses in food preparation, especially in home baking. These syrups are, in fact, an asset to any food requiring a sweetening agent because of their rich dextrose sugar content. In general, syrup may be substituted for sugar in cooking as follows, and then it's going to give you proportions. I'm not going to go into all of that. But you've got baking, cakes, icings. Wait, baking and cakes are two separate categories, apparently. Icings, pies also apparently not baking, and baked beans also apparently not baking. The semantic separation there strikes me as interesting. Refrigerator ice cream, drop cookies, etc. And this is a little pamphlet that you probably would have picked up, like attached to the shelf, or well, when I was growing up, it would have been in like a little plastic hanger or something attached to the shelf at the grocery store. But it's that type of pamphlet. I'm not sure distributionally where it would have been located at the grocery store in the 1940s, because that's a bit before my time, but it's like a little pamphlet flyer thing that you would have picked up at the grocery store. And so this was from IGA Syrup, made by the Independent Grocers Alliance Distribution Company. The applesauce cake also wanted you to use. Really? I didn't see the corn syrup in the applesauce cake recipe. That's interesting. Molasses is better in baked beans rather than syrup. Molasses or brown sugar. Interesting. I didn't know that, mostly because I don't really eat beans. So I haven't experienced a lot of baked beans and certainly haven't made them myself. All right, let's look at, this is the last one in this folder, and we've still got more stuff, and I'm gonna get through as much of it as I can today because these are all really interesting. How to Bake by the Ration Book, new 1944 edition, presented by Kate Smith. If anybody knows who Kate Smith is and why it's important that she was the one presenting this, please share with me, because I have no clue. Oh, and we have 16-Bit Eric rating on the Rogan 27 channel. Welcome in, welcome Eric. Thank you so much for the raid. I hope that your time in Baldur's Gate 3 was fun and rewarding. It is always wonderful to have you join us. Blue Rooster, hello, welcome. And Baba Yeehaw, hello, welcome. Welcome in all of the Raiders. For anybody who's new here, I am Anthony Wright de Hernandez, Community Collections Archivist at Virginia Tech. And you have come in on my personal channel, Rogan27. So yes, I am also Rogan27. This show is a show I do every Wednesday for about 2 hours. And I share materials from special collections and university archives at Virginia Tech. And I stream to 2 channels. I stream to the Virginia Tech channel, which is twitch.tv/VTUL Studios, as well as to my own channel. And we just are exploring items from the collection, most of which I've never seen before. And today's topic is World War II on the Homefront. And so far today we've looked at alumni newsletters from Virginia Tech from during the war period. We looked at a clothes collection flyer, and we've been looking at sugar rationing stuff right now. And I've got some more stuff that we'll look at shortly, including there's some photographs of aircraft, we've got some ration books, we've got some draft paperwork. So yeah, that's what we're doing today, is World War II on the Homefront. And for anybody curious, upcoming weeks, I can actually say, because I have it. Next week, we are once again looking at the nuclear ship Savannah, because we looked at that at the end of last month and had a blast, and there was still tons of stuff to look at. So we're gonna revisit the nuclear ship Savannah, and then coming up right after Labor Day is 2 collections about the Textile Workers Union of America. And then, we'll figure out where we go from there. But welcome in, everybody. It's great to have you here. And indeed, for anybody who happens to be here who does not already follow 16-Bit Eric, you should definitely follow 16-Bit Eric, a wonderful streamer, a wonderful community, does a lot of tabletop role-playing game content, is very knowledgeable about that industry, and is indeed a regular GM on the Twitch channels, running games as well as occasionally playing in them. So yeah, you should definitely follow 16-Bit Eric if you don't already. And Baba Yiga, thank you for the subscription. Okay, How to Bake by the Ration book. And I was just reading the cover here, 1944 edition presented by Kate Smith, and I have no idea who Kate Smith is and why it's interesting that she's presenting it. Like, I don't know. Oh, Fluidan, thank you. Maybe Catherine Elizabeth Smith, May 1st, 1907 to June 17th, 1986, was an American contralto referred to as the First Lady of Radio. Smith was well known for her renditions of God Bless America and When the Moon Comes Over the Mountain. She became known as the Songbird of the South because of her tremendous popularity during World War II. That seems like a good bet as to who it would be. So this is from Swan's Down Wartime Recipes. Swan's food company that I don't know their full history. I'm really only familiar with them from their frozen delivery service that operated, I think still operates today, but I know that my grandparents used their frozen delivery service in the 90s, and that's really what I know about them. If anybody else knows more of their history and wants to share, feel free. As I said, I am not a specialist in food history. Note that reading any farther into her discography requires very serious historical terms warning. Yeah, thanks, Key Squared, for the content warning there. Last minute news! The longer they work on the problems that war brings to baking, the more resourceful. This is definitely not Kate Smith's voice. Sorry, let me try this again, and I'm just going to do a regular voice instead. The longer they work on the problems that war brings to baking, the more resourceful the Swan's Down kitchens seem to become. These last three inspirations, so carefully worked out, are simply brilliant, I think. I just could hardly believe that such amazingly rich and luxurious looking cakes could be ration cakes at all. But they are. I love that it's luxurious looking. It doesn't really say how they taste. They're rich, which just means bold flavors. Like, rich tends to be like heavy and thick as far as like texture, but it doesn't really tell me anything about how it tastes. And luxurious looking, it doesn't really say how they taste. Do try them, and the ones in the pages that follow too, for there you'll find all the other famous Swan's Down ration recipes that have made this the most talked of little cookbook in many a long day. Kate Smith. Note that reading any farther into, 4:26 p.m. Pretty sure that means the stream is almost over. No! I'll probably push for a little bit longer because I definitely want to get to a few more of these, but thank you for the heads up on the time. Mutton and motor oil both have rich textures, but I do not recommend them in cakes. Key squared. Your old childhood friend, peanut butter, takes the place of all but 2 tablespoons of the shortening in a very popular eggless chocolate cake. So we have a peanut butter chocolate cake. Let's see, measure for measure cake. Any size, any shape, any number of eggs you want to use. In Swan's Down's measure for measure cake, the most unusual cake of the year. Okay, we might have to read this one because the most unusual cake of the year. 2, 3, 4 or 5 eggs. Sifted Swan's Down cake flour, same measure as eggs. Sugar, same measure as eggs. A dash of salt for each egg. 1/8 teaspoon cream of tartar for each egg. 1/4 teaspoon grated lemon rind or vanilla for each egg. Remove eggs from refrigerator several hours before using. I will just note, it is common practice in the United States to store eggs in the refrigerator, and that is because the eggs during the process by where they go from the farm to the market, and the food quality standards in the United States require them to be washed in such a way that the external coating on the egg is removed. Therefore, they will spoil very quickly if left out, where if you happen to be in a different part of the world, say like places in Europe, that coating remains intact and they last much, much longer outside the fridge, which is why in many parts of Europe, it is not typical to store eggs in the fridge. But in the US, you have to put the eggs in the fridge or they're going to go bad pretty quick. It's almost the same as my mom's biscuit recipe. She has a whole formula based on the milk and flour used and the number of biscuits you want to make. Yeah, there's a lot of like, I mean, a pound cake was literally a pound of butter and a pound of flour, and like it's a pound cake because you used a pound of stuff, and that was like the measure that you used to make it. Okay, sorry, I got distracted by the instruction to use refrigerated eggs, or to take eggs out of the fridge. Break into a glass the number of eggs required. Into another glass, measure an equal amount of sifted flour and sift flour 4 times. Measure equal amount of sugar. Place eggs in mixing bowl. Add salt, cream of tartar, flavoring, and about 1/4 of the sugar. Beat with rotary egg beater, adding rest of sugar gradually. Beat until light colored and very thick as mixture falls from beater. Beat at least 1 full minute per egg. Add flour all at once and stir in quickly and thoroughly. Turn into pan, asterisk, greased on bottom only, lined with waxed paper to 1 inch of edge, and greased lightly again. Bake in moderate oven, 350 degrees Fahrenheit, for 20 to 30 minutes. So a 2-egg cake, you want an 8 by 8 by 2 inch pan, 3-egg cake, 9 by 9 by 2, etc. Interesting. I think it's just unusual because of the if you want 2 eggs, you're gonna do 2 cups of flour and 2 cups of sugar and etc. Happy day cake, just 3 minutes, actual beating by the clock, and you'll be proud of this fine-grained cake made by the Speedway method. I don't know the Speedway method. No eggs. No sugar. No shortening. So this one is getting beyond just the sugar rationing to where there are shortages of other things. And indeed, the past 3 years, shortages of things at the grocery store have become something that many of us are familiar with again, and these never stopped being valid ways to make things. So it's certainly worth looking at some of these older cookbooks, especially the ones targeted towards rationing, because if you don't have something, it's possible that you can make something roughly equivalent with other ingredients. Okay. Next. Ration books. So there was a question about the rationing of other things beyond just sugar. So this is, I don't know a ton about the ration books. So let me look this up and see what the history note says. World War II Ration Book 4. During World War II, the shipment of food to troops abroad, rationing of supplies like fuel and rubber, and trade import restrictions caused a shortage of foods and materials in the United States. As a solution, the U.S. government utilized the Office of Price Administration to create a rationing system to evenly distribute foods. Advertisements also urged Americans to use less of foods such as sugar and meat. The source for that is the National World War II Museum. So, what we have in this collection is a war ration book printed during World War II, issued to Mart Barton of Alton, Missouri. The pages contain printed rip-out stamps for various rationed items. Some stamps have been torn out. The back of the ration book warns recipients to never buy rationed goods without ration stamps and never pay more than legal price. I watched this guy on YouTube that made Civil War era coffee from sweet potatoes. And it was Max Miller on Tasting History. Yeah, I've recommended Tasting History a number of times. The research that he does into the recipes and the videos he does explaining them, it's a very good series. The other one that I recommend, especially for looking at hard times sort of foods, like rationing eras, specifically like Depression era things, is Emmy Made in Japan. another YouTube streamer, who also does like taste tests of military meals ready to eat, and things like that. She's also really good, and has a whole series of like Depression era cooking. But yeah, tasting history and Emmy Made in Japan, definitely channels to are worthy of taking a look at. All right, we're going to look at this ration book here. United States of America, Office of Price Administration. This is ration book 4. I know I've got some other ration books here. I think they just, I'm not sure about the numbers. I'm guessing maybe this was the 4th one issued, or ration book 4 had a different mix of things in it. I'm not certain. If anybody knows about like the numbering of ration books, I would love it if somebody had that info to share. You've got the OPA, Office of Price Administration, and their lovely logo there. Issued to Mart Barton. It just says Alton, Missouri. They didn't put their complete address. That's fine. We don't need it at the moment. Read before signing. If, in accepting this book, I recognize that it remains the property of the United States government, I will use it only in the manner and for the purposes authorized by the Office of Price Administration. Void if altered. It was never signed. It is a criminal offense to violate rationing regulations. The back cover, you have the wonderful like eagle shield seal. Never buy rationed goods without ration stamps. Never pay more than the legal price. United States Office of Price Administration. Important. When you have used your ration, salvage the tin cans and waste fats. They are needed to make munitions for our fighting men. Cooperate with your local salvage committee. And this was put out by the United States Government Printing Office in 1943. So, if you've never seen a ration book, this is the inside of a ration book, which I had never seen until I started looking at things for this episode. Let's see, I want to find, here we go. This is what I want. They still used fats for munitions, and apparently, I honestly, I didn't know either, Blue Rooster, but yeah, apparently. So, I don't know detail. I don't know specifics. I'm, like I said, this is like the first time I've ever really looked at one. But what I can see is, all right, we've got, so right now let's look at the blue sheet, which two stamps have been used from the blue sheet. And you can tell by the symbol on it, it is for grain. So the stamp would be in order to get some sort of grain, so like flour. You've got stamps for 1, 2, 5, and 8. And I'm not certain. I assume that means you can get 8 unit of measure of whatever grain thing that you're getting. So like 8 cups of flour if you're buying it by the cup. I'm not certain. I know it was a thing in the mid-19th century. It essentially caused the Sepoy rebellion in India. Cartridges were lubed with cow or pig fat, which was sacrilege to both Hindus and Muslims. Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, that would make sense that it would really infuriate people. But yeah, I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm also, like, war history, These are not my areas of expertise. I find them really fascinating, but so the blue stamps are grain. The red stamps are, it looks like fruit. I wonder if it's fruit and vegetable. It's a cornucopia, but it specifically looks just like fruits inside. And I'm not certain. You've got 1, 2, 5, and 8 as numbers. And I don't know. I assume that means 8 fruits, 1 fruits, and I don't know. The things cost a certain amount I don't know. I have no idea what these green stamps are for. It's a hand holding a torch. Is it like a fuel stamp of some sort? So like petrol or something like that? It's your Liberty ration? I think the red one, Baba Yeeha, that would make sense to me as like available produce. Candles. My guess is like that this would be for something like natural gas or charcoal or those types of like household fuels that are used, or possibly for gasoline for the car. Just the torch. These ones, you can see a lot of these were used. So sugar, there's only 1 sugar stamp left on here. I don't know what the numbers mean. 37? No idea. There's a bunch of spare ones here. The top row is all coffee. There's coffee in their booklet. Yeah, I know. I'm not Catherine Janeway. More spares. Here, like, this green sheet is almost gone. I'm guessing that's fuel. And this is like, I think it's produce, like fruit and vegetable. This is grain. There doesn't appear to be any meat coupons in here, and I don't know if that's because they've all been used. No idea. I do have other ration books, so we might get a chance to glance at some of them. I don't have a ton of time left, but I'm gonna push. There's more interesting things. There's never enough time to look at everything. Oh, Blue Rooster, it's the bot tends to not like certain things. So let's see. According to zealandhistory.org, green means processed foods such as canned and bottled fruits, juice, vegetables, soup, baby food, frozen food, spreads, and dried foods. So, but that was for green stamps. Zealand history, would that be specifically about New Zealand? Because, these are US, that was a US ration book. Green and blue stamps were used for processed foods, such as canned and bottled fruits, juice. Oh, sorry, I found the same result that you had, Zealand Historical Society. National War Museum. I love that there are pictures, but it doesn't tell me what they mean. Contained removable stamps, good for certain rationed items like sugar, meat, cooking oil, and canned goods. I'm not certain. Red was for meat. Okay, there was red in there. Quick glance here at the Liddle Collection. There's some lovely images here. These are from the Virginia Tech Airport. I don't know for certain exact dates on things, but I'm gonna find historical notes. So not all of these will necessarily be in the right time frame, but no, I mean, these are all 1941 to 1945, so. The Virginia Tech Airport, initially planned in 1929, and construction of a runway strip. Okay, that sentence does not parse correctly. It was initially planned in 1929, and a runway strip was constructed shortly thereafter. The land was provided by VPI, but the state funded 50% of the costs. It opened operations in 1931, and over the next 50 years, it grew and expanded its capabilities. The airport at Virginia Tech underwent substantial updates and modernization in the early 1990s. So this collection includes photographs of the airport and aircraft during World War II, as well as a newsletter, but we're going to focus on the photos. Yes. Yes, Blue Rooster. I am at Virginia Tech. So I don't have any specifics. There's not like a key or a guide. So this appears to be like a car outside of a building, which this looks like the airport terminal. I've never actually been to the airport at VT. It's a private airport. It's a small, like, private airport, and only flies like small, like Cessnas and things like that today, even. So like if I need to go on a flight, I have to drive to like a commercial flight. I would be driving up to Roanoke for that. So I don't know like exactly the type of airplanes that those are, but I thought this was an interesting enough collection because it is World War II. It is here on the home front, because in Virginia. But these are definitely World War II era aircraft. And it's just an interesting pictorial collection. I wish I had details like, oh, there are some names at least. Let's see. All this says is Nelson on left, and then Glenn Dickens, VPI Airport, 1942, from Galax, killed in combat, 1944, Europe. So that's, this one is the person who died in combat in Europe. Anyway, I always like to find a good photo collection when I was I may have actually used a photo from here for promotional stuff if this collection had been on the shelf when I initially pulled things. It wasn't. It was in use somewhere. And so I didn't get to see it until this morning. Yeah, there's not a ton of information provided, but they're really cool photos. I would be really curious to know more about them. Sadly, this is a thing that happens with a lot of photographs. These photos, they look really interesting, but nobody bothered to write down on them who are the people. Why was this photo taken? What's the importance of it? So the things, like, it would be interesting historically, like, what was the date? Where was it taken? Who are these people? Like this photo here, all it says is that Nelson is in the middle. And we know this is the Nelson Liddle Collection, so we know who Nelson is, but I have no idea who the other three people are. Why was he with them? What's the point? Why was this photo taken? Where was it taken? When was it taken? And we don't know. So the photos are great, but from a historical standpoint, the value of them comes when you get the contextual information. Like, who are all these people? And why are they here? I know contextually that this is at the airport. It's a two-wing propeller aircraft. I could probably, if I went through books of aircraft at the time, figure out what airframe that is and specifically what kind of airplane it is. It has the white star on it, so I'm assuming military craft of some sort. But like, there are things I could figure out from it, but it would require a lot more work, where if they had noted stuff either on the back of the photo or alongside it in a companion document, it becomes much more valuable from a historical preservation perspective. So if you happen to have like old photographs in a shoebox somewhere, or a digital drive of photos, and you don't have that stuff noted, I would recommend at some point adding that. Sorry, I'm knocking a couple of bots off of the other channel. Anyway, yeah, it's helpful. Like, we can look at these and they look interesting and but we would probably spend a lot more time looking at them and discussing them if I had context for the photos that we could dig into. Okay. We're gonna quickly, very, very quickly, like super quickly, look at a couple of things. Because it's really like, it's time for me to be going home. But I'm really enjoying this and I want to keep doing it. So I do know what time it is. It will be very quickly. All right, scrap drive stuff. This is what I meant to start the stream with, because this was the promotional image. And I meant to like have this on screen as like when I first came off the starting screen, and totally was not prepared. So this is material from the Blacksburg, Virginia Polytechnic Institute Civilian Defense Council records. And this folder is National Scrap Drive Instructional Materials, 1942 to 1943. Paper Trooper, War Production Board. And you've got that wonderful yellow circular symbol. Use the Paper Trooper campaign materials to energize your school waste paper collections. This is put out by the War Production Board. Paid for by the paper and paperboard industry. Save a bundle a week. Save some boy's life. U.S. Victory Waste Paper Campaign. A manual for school administrators and community leaders. Oh, so we should make sure that Quark gets a copy, because Quark was a community leader, right? If you're new here, Star Trek references will happen. More waste paper must be salvaged. Military requirements are enormous. They come first, and they will be met. The amount of paper collected and made available for reuse will condition the amount available for civilian purposes, newspapers, magazines, and school books. That is why the War Production Board, acting in cooperation with the U.S. Department of Education, the National Education Association, the American Newspaper Publishers Association, and the Conservation Committee of the Waste Paper Consuming Industries, has developed the Paper Trooper campaign materials, and now makes these available to help you stimulate the salvage of waste paper by schools. And to work with school administrators and community leaders on school waste paper salvage, the Advisory Committee on School Salvage Programs has been set up by Dr. John W. Studebaker, U.S. Commissioner of Education. And then it gives some names. Let's see. Use this simple order blank to get your supply of Paper Trooper official emblems and materials. Oh gosh. So they really did have badges. Those yellow badges. You could order those to put on your clothes. The chevrons, because you're going to have a rank while you're attending school and collecting paper. School certificates of merit, Paper Trooper certificates of merit, and householders' pledge cards. So this is like get kids to collect paper by pretending that they are in the military. And so they're going to get a patch and the chevrons to feel like they're important because they've been deputized to collect paper. Very 1940s wartime thing to do. How paper goes to war. Several 100,000 items used by the armed forces of the U.S. require paper in packaging or construction. Huge amounts of paperboard are used by the Red Cross for blood plasma containers. All Army clothing and equipment is shipped in waterproof paper wrappers. Reports of successful school waste paper salvage campaigns in all parts of the country have been carefully analyzed to determine what makes them succeed. These reports have come from WPB field investigations and have been written up and sent in by school leaders, newspaper publishers, and salvage committees. From what has been learned in this way about the mechanics of school collection methods, the Paper Trooper campaign materials have developed. A program using all the campaign materials would be a very potent program indeed. It would combine the stimulating elements of some of the most productive school salvage programs now in use. I want to spend so much more time, but I am going to have to end extremely soon. There's one more thing I wanted to look at quickly before we leave. Actually, no. I do have to stop because it is time for me to go home, and usually I'm supposed to have ended so that I could pack up. So I'm going to mark this collection. I really wanted to look at this one. It is the Robert E. Taylor Collection, which includes a bunch of like draft paperwork, and has a lovely photograph and some letters, and there's a whole saga in here. I'm gonna save that for its own stream because it's a story. So we'll get to it another time. Let's go ahead and I'm gonna close this out, figure out where the heck we're gonna go, and we'll raid on so that I'm able to pack up and head towards home. Anyway, thank you everybody for joining me today. Coming up next week, as I said, we will be revisiting the nuclear ship Savannah, which was the first nuclear-powered civilian ship in the world. It's a cargo ship, part of like merchant marine style ship. And we spent a bunch of time last week with the press kit, and there's a lot more stuff in that collection, and it was super interesting, and so we're gonna revisit that next week. Coming up on the 6th of September, Textile Workers Union of America. I have 2 collections that touch that, and since it's right after Labor Day, I thought we would look at that. And then, let's see, on the 13th of September, I have a guest host who's not guest hosted before. We'll be joined by guest host archivist Bess, and looking at the John Parsons papers. I don't know specifically what's in that, except that it is history of science and technology. So that will be interesting. But yeah, that's stuff I've got coming up. Home, we are going home. So let's see, options for raids. It's been a couple of weeks. I see a shark cam for Monterey Bay Aquarium. Of course, there is Stephen Joyce, who we love to say hello to, who appears to be on a break at the moment, which makes sense because it is about that time. But he should be back extremely soon and is playing a game called Viewfinder. So I think I'm gonna send us over to Stephen Joyce, because Stephen Joyce is a lovely, lovely streamer, works with higher education in Scotland, and I love saying hello. So we're gonna pop on over there. I will be live again for another archives stream in 1 week's time, Wednesday, August 30th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And I hope that I will see some of you then. But until I return, I hope that you all stay curious and keep exploring history. So, until next time.